Happy week 16, everybody. I'm Jake Henderson, and this is my presentation over infrastructure and transportation. The two readings we had this week was Bingham Chapter 15 by Felbinger and Whitehead, which covered the development and redevelopment of infrastructure. It covered a multitude of factors around infrastructure as a whole. The second reading we had covered solely transportation, and it was called The Public Perceptions of Pricing Existing Roads and Other Transportation Policies. It was a Texas survey done by a group looking for ways to improve funding for current roads and ideas for creating more efficient and more sustainable funding for those road projects. So infrastructure, it's the physical systems of facilities that support health and safety of citizens and supply the foundations for urbanized societies. Infrastructure makes transportation possible. Infrastructure investments yield a basic foundation for economic activity. They have social benefits, such as, you may only throw out one bag of trash, but you pay just as much as the other guy, and the other guy has 10 bags of trash. But at the same time, he only uses 20,000 gallons a month of water, but you use 40,000 gallons a month of water, and you pay the same for the infrastructure. So the social benefits and utility is a big deal. The $1 investment, it's estimated $1 investment would get a $4 return in any kind of investing in infrastructure. Making up infrastructure is essentially anything you can think of that makes your life easier and helps you in your daily life to be disease-free, to go get food, to travel to your job, anything to take care of you and your family. That's what makes up infrastructure. The timeline of infrastructure, there's always been infrastructure. Since we've been living in villages as humans, we've always had a way to get from one teepee to the other or one hut to the other. There's always been a way that things are done around, where we go to the bathroom, where we dress our meat, things like that. In the 1950s and 60s, we saw the interstate highway system being built. That was actually a DoD project used to mobilize the military for the Cold War threat of the Soviets. In the 70s and 80s, we started to see a neglect of our physical structures. We kind of built them up, and then we put them up and we forgot about them. We forgot that we had to maintain them. And that began to affect public safety and started to spur change. In 1988, a report by the National Council on Public Works rated us as a grade C across the board on infrastructure as a grade as a whole as a nation. Managers prior to that assumed that legislators knew the importance of infrastructure and were going to fund it accordingly. However, that wasn't the case. In the 1990s, infrastructure became kind of an overused term and meaningless to everybody. Everybody decided they didn't really want to focus on it a lot, and that's when we started seeing the uprise of building kind of quick to put up, easy to tear down structures, almost a throwaway mentality. And we didn't see the sturdy structures that we built, earlier in that century. As a basic need, it's similar to Maslow's base of the pyramid. His biological needs are air, water, food, and shelter. And the equivalent for a city, or for you to live a life in a city, is to provide streets, water, sewer, and gas services. To manage infrastructure, we have the 3 R's. We have repair, rehabilitate, and replace. Repairs are correcting minor problems, while rehabilitation is intervening to improve the existing quality of the structure or restore it to its original or better condition. To replace it is exactly that: demolish it and then build a brand new structure right over the top of it. Maintenance of existing structures is actually not as encouraged as you'd think. Repairs are discouraged by legislation, and the focus has always been on building new facilities. That's why we have these easy to put up, easy to tear down buildings, these lightweight construction buildings, is because of this factor. People don't want to put up these giant buildings and just have to repair them. They want to make it be able to, that it's less cost effective to have to rehabilitate them, bring them up to code, as opposed to demolishing them and building up a new one. Unfunded mandates also create problems. When the government says we have to meet a certain standard and you got to do it by X time, then we've got to find the money to do it, and that creates a big problem. As far as not encouraging repairs, the Airport and Airway Trust Fund is a prime example of that. It does not fund repairs. It only funds substantial rehabilitation or replacement of the infrastructure on airports. The repairs are only funded by taxpayers. So to relieve that burden, a good strategy is to wait until a building or a runway is in disrepair enough to be rehabilitated or replaced. That keeps the burden off of the taxpayer, and it's just an overall better strategy to put it on the federal government. However, it's created a culture of letting that problem linger around before it can be fixed. Project management is a primary human resource issue. New projects are very complicated. You have to hold public hearings, have citizen input. You have to assure the citizens that you're spending their money on quality projects. There can be delays. There's delays in governmental processes, delays with intergovernmental clearances. If the water department hasn't inspected the water mains and that it can put forth the amount of water that it needs to for either your fire protection or your just general use, then you can't pour the slab or your plumbers can't come in. That intergovernmental clearance is a big source of delays, as well as citizen participation, because it's mandated that they can have a say, and you have to make them aware of what all is going on and give them that opportunity. Impact then of the legal context on infrastructure management has been the support of building new facilities at the expense of maintaining existing facilities. Moreover, federally and state-imposed mandates without subsequent funding of mandated activities have lessened local government's fiscal ability to maintain facilities in a timely manner. We cannot keep up with the repairs because repairs are being discouraged. Two different kinds of budgets for infrastructure. Capital budget, operating budget. Capital budget can span multiple years, and you have to qualify and maintain that qualification for it. Those are can come from taxes, trust funds, grants. They are planned, and they cover that determined period. Operating budgets typically cover about a year. They fund materials for maintenance, operations, personnel, payrolls, and the administration of that particular operation. And they're usually a function of the previous year with inflation added on, which is not a good strategy, especially if your spending was wasteful the year before. Planning challenges. There's federal policies and state policies. There's budget constraints, which goes into our funding. Where are we going to get it? How are we going to keep it? The coordination with other infrastructure governments or other infrastructure administrations, things like that. That coordination creates significant challenges. Ethical practices. So believe it or not, there are ethical practices that have slowly gotten better. Before, in the years leading up to the surge in infrastructure, public works professionals relied on distributors and vendors to tell them what was new on the technology front, what was the new latest and greatest thing. And so in relying on them, a lot of that was monopolized from those certain vendors. So there was room for, hey, you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. I'll cut you a really good deal under this table if you give me this bid contract. That created a big ethical problem, limited the competition. Now we have a lot more transparent processes for public bidding, and then service standards that must be met. And we have multiple people that provide the same service and the same technology and the same items to us to carry out our needs. And so with that, the Freedom of Information Act as well and request for proposal, we have a lot more fair practices, which keeps us a little more transparent and our ethics in line. So the public perception study was based on the fact that traffic congestion and infrastructure deterioration put great pressures on the nation's transportation systems. Transportation spending is tightly constrained and is characterized by significant shortfalls due to stagnant gas taxes and an aging infrastructure. Pretty much primarily determined what the public opinion would be on better ways to fund highway and infrastructure expansion and how to maintain them. So the results were obtained in Texas. There were phone calls from random digit dialing, which led to whoever answered the phone and signed up for the survey got a mailing, paper copy, or they got an email with a link. They took the survey, all the results were tallied up, and they had a follow-up survey to provide a little more specific information. The results were kind of put with these random little binary numbers into this logic model, which is really fancy. They spent a lot of the study talking about how they conducted the survey and very little comparatively talking about the results of the study. But they took all these fancy numbers, plugged them in this wonderfully clear and concise formula, and got these highlights. 83% of respondents were in favor of a dedicated, I missed the last word, truck lane. So 18-wheelers needed to have their own dedicated lane. 83%. I totally agree. I'm one of those 83%. Regular toll road users and frequent rush hour drivers favored new transportation policies. However, the further someone lived from their destination and the longer their commute, the less in favor they were of more toll roads. Tolls were preferred to upping gas taxes, which would increase gas prices. People felt they would pay less in tolls than they would in taxes. Improvement of existing roads was favored over building new roads because building new roads creates an exponential maintenance problem. So for all the miles you're putting on, you're not just maintaining that road, you still have to maintain all the other roads. So it creates just an added burden and it builds onto each other. So a lot of people said, hey, we need to maintain what we have over building new. Takeaways. Infrastructure is a very multifaceted and intricate piece of public administration. It requires a large grouping of people and funding, and the challenges in repairs just increase as technology progresses. I mean, the more gadgets we can put out there to make it easier, the more we have to put into it and upgrade and rehabilitate and repair things. Significant political challenges, unfunded mandates, intergovernmental relations, budget shortfalls, asking for grants and being denied, things like this all cut into our infrastructure. Transportation, however, is just a small portion of the infrastructure puzzle. It's a very large piece of the puzzle, but it is just a piece of the infrastructure puzzle. So, my first question, what would the motivations behind impeding repairs and advocating for rehab and replacement be? Are they politically motivated, or are they truly a means to prevent wasteful spending? Question 2, should roadways be a shared burden by the taxpayer, or should they be toll routes paid for by those who most frequently use them? And why do you feel that way? That's all I got for you. Again, I'm Jake Henderson. Thanks for bearing with me on this. I'll leave you with Neil deGrasse Tyson and saying, we're done here. Y'all have a good one.